Tristan Burns is a data leadership coach, keynote speaker, and advisor to data teams across the UK, US, and Europe. He helps data leaders move their teams from reactive service desks to strategic partners who shape commercial outcomes. Through coaching, workshops, and his book club community, the Badass Bookshelf, Tristan supports leaders who want to influence at the highest level, build confident teams, and drive meaningful impact. Thank you so much for joining us, Tristan. Welcome.
My pleasure, Seth. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure. So I'd love to start off every interview with kind of a semi-random question just to get the ball rolling. What is something that you've changed your mind about recently?
One thing that does spring to mind quite quickly is the concept of data literacy as being something that we should be driving for as data leaders within our organizations. I think if I can just explain where that sort of comes from, I see data literacy as being an attempt to influence and persuade the wider business around understanding data concepts and being educated on how to read charts and graphs and understand what certain terminology means in the data space. Now, the thing that I've changed my mind about is that I don't think that's the most important thing in terms of data education for data teams to pursue. I actually think that it's business literacy for data teams as being far more important. I think there's a lot of data teams sort of saying that, oh, the business doesn't understand data and therefore we have a problem. And it's their fault that they're not data literate and that they don't understand how to read data. It's not our fault. But as data people and the people that I work with who are data leaders being the ones that need to, drive the business forward with data, it's actually far more important that they themselves and their teams are business literate so that they can speak the language of the business rather than asking everyone to come to our terminology and our way of thinking. We should be as one with the business and understand their terms. Far more important.
Before we jump back in, if you're career switching into data analytics or trying to find your voice in stakeholder conversations, you're not alone. I run a free weekly newsletter for quietly ambitious analysts who want clarity, confidence, and better communication. If you'd like to join the community, you can subscribe using the link in the description. I'll see you there. Now back to the conversation. Why do you think there is such a common belief that data literacy needs to take place for people across teams as opposed to just data teams specifically?
Well, I think the reason the belief has come about is because data literally inhibits every corner of the business. There's no role within a modern organization that doesn't either produce and or consume data. And therefore, it is relevant that those business teams do understand the data that they interact with, that they produce. That's certainly where I believe that it has come from, a need to make sure that those people in those roles have a minimum understanding of their role in the creation and consumption of data.
Tristan, I know that you work a lot with data teams and leaders. What is your approach when you're working with those leaders to get data teams more business centric? What is your approach to kind of getting them there?
Well, the first thing I sort of ask is, do you know your business strategy? And 9 times out of 10, to be honest, I get crickets. The data leaders and their teams will say, well, either the business strategy doesn't exist, it hasn't been communicated to us, or we don't really see our role in it. So that's where I begin initially. I think that I would encourage those folks to go and understand what the business strategy is. If there isn't one, then it might be time for you to do some upward influencing and be a part of the conversations in order to help them establish one. Personally, I think that data needs to be in the room when business strategies are being created. We can't have a business strategy that isn't at least informed by data. Furthermore, we can't have business strategy that isn't measured by data. So we have this, cyclical role to play in being a part of the organization's overall strategy. I hear a lot of data people and data teams focusing heavily on the concept of data strategy, but I think that until we nail the business strategy piece and we are part of that, we shouldn't be talking about data strategy, because data strategy is, well, first of all, it's not really a separate thing. And second of all, it's downstream from business strategies.
I have seen this even just as an individual contributor. I've seen some of that fallout with business strategy. Typically on the bottom of the pyramid, you're working towards something, you don't exactly know what. Maybe KPIs aren't very clearly defined. You don't really know as a team what the aligned goal is that you're working towards by the end of the quarter, by the end of the year. Something I've been really curious about is your experience with corporate, because I know that you were leading data initiatives prior. Would you mind telling me a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, so now I work for myself, as you kind of mentioned in the intro bio, but my most recent role for 4 years was as global head of data and analytics for Pizza Hut's digital business outside of the United States and China. Pizza Hut, as you know, it is a very well-established business. In many respects, it's a legacy business. It predates the internet by decades, and a lot of the practices and behaviors in that place are um, older styles of thinking that you might find in similar businesses of similar age and tenure. So the role for a data leader within an organization like that is to change the hearts and minds about how to think about data and how to think about the role of tech, particularly within the organization. I'll give examples. We've got individuals who might own a suite of restaurants, maybe they own 5 or 6 restaurants, and feel very close to their customers, are in the shops on a Friday and Saturday evening when they're the busiest, and feel very close to the sentiment and the wants and needs of their customers. While that may be true, sadly, that's actually a very small sample size compared to what we're actually analyzing at scale across millions and millions of visitor sessions on an e-commerce platform, for example. So coming to those people and saying, your opinions are valid from a qualitative standpoint, but I've actually got a ton of data that says something that you don't necessarily agree with. And we need to look at both of those perspectives, not just yours and not just mine, but to understand what decision we might want to make out of this or how we might interpret this data requires them to sort of turn around and say, okay, yeah, there's value in your data, which isn't always easy when people have been doing something for many decades.
It sounds like such a high pressure position to be in. And then you're working with people that have such varying perspectives and they have their kind of silo or function, their lane that they're focused in on. How do you capture alignment amongst people?
So I think we want to be careful that we don't come into the room and tell people how it's got to be and how it is. We've got to go in with a collaborative mindset and care about their problems and their challenges. We certainly don't want to be their service desk, because I'll probably talk about at some point, and just answering questions that they have. We have a role to play as well. But we need to care about the problems that they have, that they are suffering with, things that keep them up at night, and be very, very keen to hear them explain those problems to us in as much detail as possible so that we can, as a data team, get as close to the business problems as possible and understand them from the perspective of the people who are on the front lines. At that point, what we should then do is consider how data might help solve some of those problems, or at least give insights into clarifying what those problems are and how large they are potentially, and what the opportunity size is if we were to address them. And once you know what the problem is and you've come to the table with some suggestions for potential solutions, that's when you start to have a really good conversations with people, with those sorts of people, because they feel listened to. They feel like you've interpreted what they're saying and you've come back with ideas and suggestions, rather than just coming to them straight up with your ideas, or not doing that at all and just waiting for them to come to you, which isn't always good either. So it's definitely a collaborative thing, and starting from a position of servitude. How can I listen to you and understand your problems, and then go ahead and see what I can do to solve them?
I love that you mentioned it's more about being in service to someone. I think a lot of people do, myself included at times, you listen to respond. It's like you're having conversations with people just to tell them what your perspective is, what your idea or initiative is, but when you're not listening to the other side, you're closing the gateway for further collaboration. So I love that you highlighted that. Tristan, you've really kind of worked yourself up the ladder over the years. You had started out as a data analyst. Would you mind just kind of briefly walking us through your career journey?
Sure. So I graduated with a master's degree in finance, hoping to go into investment banking. I graduated kind of at the tail end of the global financial crisis, where there was no finance jobs available. And being in Australia at the time, during an oil and gas boom, a resources boom, I ended up working actually as a business analyst initially, rather than data analyst, in an oil and gas company, where I stuck around for a little over 3 years. I was building a CRM project over there. So it was kind of like, as a BA, getting to know the requirements of the business stakeholders and interpreting those into technical requirements for the project team to go and build out this CRM tool. As time went by as well, more and more data was starting to be entered into the CRM and became of value. We didn't have anyone to analyze that data or to discover the insights. So I kind of played those two roles and morphed into a data analyst, looking at social investment data. specifically within that organization. I got made redundant from that role because in 2015 there was an oil price crash. And so I took the opportunity to come to London. That's when I moved to the UK and ended up finally working in an investment bank. I worked on the fixed income sales and trading floor for Bank of America Merrill Lynch, which some of your listeners might be familiar with. And that role was a heavy market analytics role, ops role, very close to the traders and the sales teams who were crunching through billions and billions in deals every day and wanting very timely, very accurate, very fast market data, client data reports. So it became this role of very quickly, very accurately, and very carefully punching out reports and dashboards and charts and handing them over to those teams for them to make, I guess, I hope, good decisions off the back of. Well, I enjoyed the role and the work that I did in getting the reps in and becoming a very good, very thorough analyst. There were two things about that role I didn't necessarily love. First of all, I'll just say it was the hours. It was kind of 8 till 10 o'clock at night, pretty much every day. More times than not, I'd have dinner at work and would get a taxi home kind of thing because the trains had stopped. I didn't really love that. And not have lunch and everything else was fun. But that's kind of, par for the course within the banking sector. And the other thing, I'll be honest, that I didn't really enjoy about that role was the visibility over the impact of my work. So it's a very hierarchical structure. You're dealing with multi-millionaire MDs who don't really know what your name is, who just want the information to be accurate and quick, and they go off with it and do something that you have no end-to-end visibility over what they do with it, really. And I didn't like that. I wanted to be closer to the action. I wanted to understand how my insights and analysis were helping. It was a little bit unsatisfying that I couldn't see the end-to-end nature of the life cycle of my data. So I ended up leaving that role and I wanted to go and work in tech, particularly in a startup, because I wanted the ultimate opposite to a major corporate, which was I joined a 100-person startup team in the medical technology sector. Week one, I was in the room with the COO and the founders and providing them very, very terrible dashboards because I had no idea what the job was yet. But it was fascinating, and I started hearing words like strategy and seeing how a small company really does, well, hopefully interpret and work with data. One thing I will say is that there were fundraising and there was lots of different decisions being made and changing direction on a dime kind of thing, which I've come to learn isn't great either. But it was fascinating to be there and to see that. I think it was about almost 2 years that I was there, but ultimately I was tapped on the shoulder to come and head up the new Pizza Hut initiative, which was a digital business that was being built within Pizza Hut International. And I was the first data hire and grew the team quickly as global head of data there.
I love that you've worked in different industries and that you also had that startup experience, because I think most people, when they're thinking about breaking into the data field, they're just envisioning the big five and they're looking at that as success. But it sounds like you learned a ton working for a startup.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that I was able to have my first two career roles were major corporates, billions of dollar companies, and then a startup for a while. And the cool thing about that is that when you're in a major corporate, you kind of wear one hat and you have one specific job and you've got one thing to do. You're a small cog surrounded by thousands of other cogs. But in a startup, one day you might be on a sales call. The next day you might be,
Great.
I don't know, crunching through accounting data or finance data or something. You just needed to do things because there's so many jobs to be done and you get so much exposure to different areas of the business very, very quickly.
I could see that too, because even when I did nonprofit work, it has nothing to do with data analytics, but I felt like just learning how to be a project manager and marketing things and working with customers who would be our volunteers or the people who were receiving our services. It
Yeah,
taught me so much about how the business works. So then by the time you're in a data role, you see kind of how the work you're doing impacts the bigger picture.
that is an excellent point, and it's something I'm quite passionate about. I don't know if you mind me going a little tangential now.
Let's go.
I'm often talking to people who ask me, Tristan, I've been this thing for 10 years and I want to break into data. Do you think anyone will hire me? Whether or not someone will hire you, I don't really have the answer to, but I think it's an absolute um, brilliant thing to hire someone who has domain experience, who has other than data experience. A lot of people will finish school, maybe they'll go and do some studies at university about data, and then they'll go their first. They'll just try and become a data analyst in their first role. And I think personally, that's not ideal. I don't really believe that. I might get in trouble for this, but I don't really think we should have entry level roles in data necessarily. I personally believe that we should be bringing people over with domain experience into the data space. I think that the technical skills that are needed in certain data roles are actually easier to acquire than are the business knowledge skills, the communication skills, the marketing skills, all those other things that are required to succeed in various business domains. And then SQL can be learned in a course for spend some time, an hour a day or something, doing a course while you're in the role, rather than requiring a new hire to have all of these technical skills and absolutely zero business knowledge. It's the wrong way around. And I'm probably the only person in the world who will say that, because companies very rarely hire people with zero technical skills into a data role. But it's wrong. I think it's a shame.
When I entered into my first full time analytics role, it wasn't even heavily technical. In fact, I don't even think I had a technical aspect to the interview. Instead, it was more of like, can we talk about the business problems? Do you understand marketing? Because I was going into a marketing role. It's more like, do you have the mindset and the language and the perspective to be able to thrive in this space? Because every single role after that is just going to keep bringing in new pieces of technology that you can just pick up over time.
Exactly. Yeah. The technology piece we're not like set in stone. It's constantly evolving. Different companies use different tools. A really smart person can acquire the necessary parts of those skills that they need to succeed in the role, making sure that a particular candidate or hire has absolutely everything they might ever need on day one is so ridiculous. You're missing out on a ton of talent and perspective and expertise that can come from different areas. We talk about DEI, right? DEI in hiring and how important that is. And I'll take it further. I think that not only is a different a varied workforce in terms of backgrounds also really important, but it's also really important in terms of experiences. And if we just hire for one particular set of talents, even if ticking the box for, various background differences, you're still going to get very much the same style of thinking in a particular role. Whereas if we bring someone in from data who's highly technical and pair them up with someone from data who's never had a technical role, but is a very good communicator, then you've created something really powerful in that partnership.
Someone could come in and have something creative to share because of a work experience they had in the past and they saw it work in a different industry, and maybe it's going to work here. Like, there's so many other benefits to just bringing all of that in.
Absolutely. If you talk about left brain and right brain thinking, I'm not an expert on this topic, but I was in a conversation with someone last week who was a data leader in a highly technical organization, who herself was, I believe it's right brain, the more creative type of thinking. And she was sort of saying that sometimes she feels like a bit of a fraud within her organization because she's leading data as a creative and not as a particularly technical person, has never learned to write SQL, has never created a dashboard in her life, but leads highly technical teams. And in actual fact, that's allowed her and her team to be so much more successful because she's able to go and ask them questions that they would never have been asked before, challenge them in ways that they have never have been challenged otherwise. Look at attitudes that we've always done it this way and sort of said, well, I've never done it that way. Is there not a different way we might think about doing this? And it just gives so much more perspective and so much more power to the team to have someone in role, particularly a leader, I would say, who can make you think differently.
It makes sense that if people are just so hyper technical, then they are missing out on the business human to human connection that is part of the entire ecosystem. So if you can pull that creativity into it, it just really makes teams come alive. I want to talk more about leadership here in a second, Tristan, because I'm really excited to dig into that with you. But I did have a question about how you decided to get into a leadership position from an IC role.
I don't think I was given much of a say in whether or not I
Okay.
became a manager. I think it was kind of classic that I was the most senior person in a particular point in time and was given directs to look after. What I will say is that's probably true for a lot of people. I can't imagine that it's particularly intentional about that many people who say, I'd like to be a manager now, please. Can you give me some people to look after? I think it's typically we've been in a role long enough that promotion to manager is seen as something of a recognition of our abilities. What I will say is that is very challenging for a lot of people. When they have been a very stellar IC and they're very good at their IC skills, and now they're suddenly being asked to lead a team, to liaise with stakeholders, to contribute towards strategic thinking, to start to do all of these things that an IC has traditionally not been involved with. It's actually entry level role day one, totally new job, because you're suddenly being asked to be really good at something you've never done before. Oh, by the way, the pressure's up, being ratcheted up because, and you've also got people to worry about. Yeah. So for me, it was kind of a natural evolution. And I would say that I probably performed better as a manager than I ever did as an IC. I wasn't particularly technical, and well, I do like solving problems and getting stuck into the data. I wasn't as good as my peers were necessarily at certain things.
It's interesting what you said about this kind of being a natural progression. And I'm sure for a lot of people who are kind of approaching that stage in their career, it then does become a question of like, all right, now how do I level up and get better at this people leadership
Mm.
skill that's required? For you, Tristan, like what does it mean to be a good leader? Like what are the qualities that make someone a good leader?
Ooh, how long have you got? There are three specific areas in which a good leader has to manage. They have to manage up, they have to manage sideways, and they have to manage down. Coming into your role initially as a manager, most people's mind is actually going to be on how they manage down, because suddenly they've got people's roles to worry about. They've got people's career things to worry about, like promotions and end of year reviews and one-to-ones and sick leave and annual leave and PTO and all of that to worry about, which they've never really had to think about before. They've only ever been on the receiving end of that. So that's probably where a lot of people's initial stress comes from. But they will quickly learn that actually there's also a component of managing my peers at this level and influencing and supporting my peers. And furthermore, there's this concept of having to actually manage up, which is a matter of influence and persuasion in many cases, which they're not really prepared for. I'd say they know a lot about the job that their team has because they've been in the trenches with a team and done it before. So their focus is usually going to be heavily on that. They don't have much experience managing across, and they have basically none managing senior stakeholders. That's really where the trickiness sort of comes from. Beginning with the managing down component, I think it's important that uh, I have a love-hate relationship with this phrase, but I want a manager to be the dumbest person in the room. I don't mean that literally. I don't mean them to be, IQ in an IQ sense, the stupidest person in the room. But what I want is that if they have the opportunity to hire people or to promote people, that they promote and hire people who are better than them at certain aspects of their role, particularly the non-managerial components, like being technical or understanding the schematics of a data architecture or where things are in the business and that kind of thing. You want those people to be your advisors. You want people that you manage to tell you how it is. Lots of people get this backwards. They feel that as a manager, it's actually their responsibility to be the smartest person at every single component in the room and to dictate what needs to be done at every step. This is where a micromanager comes from. Suddenly, you've got someone who was very, very good at their previous job of being hands-on and technical, who's now in a position of authority, who is really bad at their current job of being a manager. They default back to the job that they used to be really, really good at, which is no longer theirs, by the way, and start pushing people's buttons and trying to micromanage them a little bit. And it never really ends particularly well. So in the first instance, I would say to anyone who's new to being a manager, get comfortable with being the dumbest person on the team and hire people who are better than you at those tasks proudly. And don't be afraid to have them being recognized as being better than you at SQL or better than you at Tableau or better than you at whatever concept where we're going to be looking at. It's very difficult, and it's associated with a thing I call manager's guilt, whereby you feel like you've gone from being a strong contributor technically to now being someone who doesn't necessarily contribute technically very much at all. Maybe you do, maybe half a day a week or a day a week you might be hands-on. Not entirely are you yet necessarily removed from it, but you've got to make sure that your team is really, really good at being your advisor. And you've got to be really, really good at asking them questions and trusting their answers and letting them guide the team on the direction. You provide them context from above and now sideways. You are the conduit between them and the remainder of the business, and you protect them / expose them when necessary to different areas of the business, but you also interpret particularly things like strategy or decisions that are being made, or, anything that might have happened that they need to know about. It's your job to be that role for them.
I would imagine that it takes an open mindset to be able to step into that leadership role, because you have to put your ego aside at that point. You have to be able to say, it's fine, I don't know all the answers, and that's why I'm hiring you.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to push people around, please don't become a manager. Do something else. Go and be a
Yeah.
personal trainer or something. Because managing a technical team or a data team or something is not for you.
Right. 100%. With the people that you coach in a leadership capacity, what are some of the biggest areas of improvement that they're trying to work on? Is it these things? Is it like learning how to not micromanage as much? Like, what are some of the bigger trends that you see?
Certainly, there are wider trends that they and their team struggle with, but specifically, if we were talking about themselves as leaders, one of the earliest questions I'll ask someone is to give me a percentage of their week that is spent doing hands-on tasks. Once I understand that they're not a team of one or two people, like two people, like let's say it's 5 to 10 people, I say how much of your time is spent each week on being an individual contributor, and they'll frequently tell me something like 75, 80%. So I turn around and say, so 4 days of your week, 3 to 4 days of your week, you're hands on delivering. And you've got 2 more days to be a leader and a manager, in which you need to cram all of your meetings with the rest of the business, your one-to-ones, all of your strategic thinking, your thinking time. And that happens all in 2 days, does it? And they're like, oh, yeah, it's really difficult. And then I sort of say, why are you spending so much time of your week doing hands-on IC tasks? And they'll tell me, oh, because I want it done right, or I'm the best at it, or, my team aren't quite there yet for me to be hands off with it. And so my response to that is, well, just let them do it. And then they answer, well, no, things would break, it'd be in big trouble and everything would fall apart. And I'm like, well, how are they going to learn? And like, yeah, okay, yeah, maybe you're right. And I'm like, and they might complain about a particular individual not being good enough at a particular skill for them to step back from. And I say, well, what's the fastest way for them to learn is you put them in the deep end and say, look, this is yours now, take it on. And I don't want them to do everything overnight or really quickly, but I want them to slowly dial back the amount of time that they are not being a manager and not allowing their people to take on greater and greater responsibility and different challenges. So that's definitely something that I would push them towards and ask them to focus on and set goals around. To my surprise, many of them actually do this very quickly, and surprised by how easy it actually is. The conversations usually go something like, "Oh yeah, I went and spoke to this person on my team and said." Did they feel comfortable taking on more responsibilities around this project? And in fact, they were extremely excited to do that because they didn't think that you believed they could, and they're really wanting to get more technical or getting their hands dirty with new technologies that they couldn't previously do, and be there to help them. Be there as someone who can check their work if they want that, at least for a little while, and then see if you can get that percentage down to 20%. Come on.
That's what I was going to ask you next. Like, is there a percentage that leaders should be kind of focused on in terms of like how much individual work they do versus not?
Not really. I think a CDO should not be doing any. Probably a VP or director level should probably not be doing any. A head of, maybe a little bit. A lead, probably a fair bit. Yeah, it really depends on your organization. Again, it will also depend on the capability of your team in the early stages. But by giving them more and more responsibility at a manageable pace, your percentage can come down a bit slowly.
I've seen this entire experience on the ground, Tristan. I have felt it. I had a manager previously, and it was the manager and then their manager who worked very closely together, but they each had differing opinions on kind of how management should work. It became really difficult, I think, for me as an employee to reach my full potential because I didn't know kind of what the standards were, what the expectations were. I didn't feel as confident in myself. But then at a later point, someone had given me more responsibility and I just like took it. I just
Yeah.
skyrocketed and took complete ownership of it. And it was great. So I know that you work with leaders, but you also work with people who are just kind of navigating their careers. Tell me about the people that you work with in that area.
Yeah. So I typically say that there's two different types of client that come to me. They're usually always data leaders. But I think that what I find is that data is not particularly a well-defined career path for a lot of people. And not every organization has got great policies around how they're going to promote data people. Some organizations will have a chief data officer. Others, the most senior data person might be a lead. And people who want more from their careers but can't see the pathway forward inside their current organization will often come to work with me to have a think about what that might be. Having said that, I also have people who don't necessarily see their next role as having the word data in the title and want to think about how they can combine their existing experience as a data professional with another area of expertise that they might navigate to, like, for example, product or datapreneurship, entrepreneurship, things like that as well. So it's very varied, the types of people that come to me in that respect. But we will often sit down and think about, well, I love to actually work backwards from what their 5-year vision for themselves is, not career vision, but lifestyle, because I think lifestyle is a really great place to start. What do you see your ideal working day being like in a few years' time? Do you get up and go to the gym? Do you work hybrid or remote? Are you going into the office? Are you working a lot of hours, or are you working, 3/4 days, or whatever it happens to be? Have them design that for me. And at the same time, I get them to write their own job description. When you're applying for a job and you read job descriptions that kind of tell you what the role is about, I actually get people to write their own. So they'll include things like maybe the job title if they know it, the culture of the organization that they want to work for, the types of responsibilities they're likely to have on a daily basis, what else is on a job description, all those kinds, the technologies they might end up being used in the role, all the sorts of things that you would see in a normal job description. But I get them to write it for their ideal job. And we sort of say, well, okay, if those are the things you want to be true in 2-3 years' time, what has to be true in 12 months? What has to be true in 6 months? And then we kind of create, working backwards, but then thinking forwards, how do we chart a course for you to get towards that ideal role that you kind of describe for yourself? And yeah, it's fun. It's a creative thing. I think people struggle with some of the exercises that we put in front of them and the questions. And oftentimes people will do these exercises and think about it and say, you know what, actually, I've thought about being a data leader all my years, but I really just enjoy being an IC. I'm going to go back and be a principal data architect somewhere and do that, because I get so much joy out of the doing, and I've never really gotten all that much joy out of the managing piece. And I'm like, fantastic, great, you'll be great at that. Just how do we figure that out? How do we get you there? And what do we need to do? We'll also look at things like, what's your network look like? Are you able to find the people who are already doing the types of jobs that you want to do? And can you go and rub shoulders with them somehow? Can you get on a call like this and ask them questions? Or can you attend an event where those sorts of people might be hanging out? All those sorts of things.
This is brilliant. It's so easy to get caught in the numbers, because I hear a lot of people just look at that end salary goal, and that's like all they're working towards. And they'll say, I don't care where I'm a data analyst, I just want to be a data analyst. What would you say to that?
Well, I am a firm believer in networking, right? And so I like people to find out what would be ideal for them so that they can actually go and target it. If you say, I want to be a data analyst in a wearable tech company, I want to go and work for Garmin or for Apple's wearable tech, I love that stuff, I'm really passionate about that. Okay, cool. All right. You don't necessarily have to land that job, but at least if you try and take the steps that might get you there, you increase the chances that you will. So now we say, well, what are the companies in the field? Write them all down. Okay, great. So we've got 10, 15 companies that you like the look of. Okay, great. Now go on LinkedIn. Who works in those companies? What are their names? What are their job titles? Are they junior people if you're in entry level, if that's what the question was, or whatever level you happen to be at? Okay, cool. Ask one of them a question. Go and connect with them on LinkedIn and see if they'll get on a call with you and tell you about their career. Just do that. And now, because they've figured out what trajectory they want and what direction they want to go, and they've done some career design, they can take intentional steps towards at least figuring out whether or not that's actually what they want. Whereas if you don't ask those questions and you don't investigate, how do you know until you're in the role whether or not that's actually what you wanted?
There's no way to know. You become more reactive in your career path when you're blanket applying. Anything will do. And I've even found myself in that situation before. Of course, when you're struggling financially, you need the experience. You get this feeling of like, I'll just take anything. But as I started progressing in the field, I realized, oh, I need to be reflecting on what it is that I like and what I don't like, because otherwise I'm just going to keep repeating the same patterns from the past.
Exactly. I'll talk to people who are unhappy in their current role and or their industry and say, how did you get here? And they're like, well, I don't know. I just got this one job and then I got this other job and I kind of just bounced around and ended up here. And I'm like, doesn't sound like there's much intentionality around that. You kind of just left. They'll always say, I left that job because I hated it. And now I'm at this job, which I hate. And it's like, well, you just want to keep moving from jobs you hate. People
Right.
will always try and find a job. Will always try to move jobs because they don't like the one that they currently have, but they won't focus on whether or not the one they're going to is what they really want to be doing. They're just happy to be leaving the place they're not happy with. And I'm like, well, it's not really any way to approach it. It's not very strategic or intentional. Let's change that narrative. Let's start thinking about where you actually want to land. Stop bouncing around between jobs you hate. Pursue the things that you really want, but evaluate them as well. Make sure that they're the right thing for you before you take the dive. Keep going on this. I know that people will say, well, that sounds all well and good, but the market's not great right now. So people just kind of need to take whatever job they can get. There's an article, it's a few years old now, and it's from the US, that it was 75 to 80% of jobs are not advertised, of jobs that are filled, which tells me that only the jobs, when we see a job description somewhere or an ad for a job, it's 1/4 or 1/5 of the entire job market. Yet 90+% of the people are going after it because 90% don't know how to network. They don't know how to get to that hidden job market, which exists. And the only way to go after that hidden job market is to network with people and to make connections, because those people are giving those jobs to their friends, to people they know. Because there's 3 filters to fill a job. The first one is, can we find someone internal to do that job? The second filter is, who do people in our company know that we can hire to that job? That's 80% of the job's already gone. And the final one is, can we advertise this job? Oh, and you got recruiters in there somewhere. Those first 2 things, those first 2 filters are where most jobs are taken.
You were talking about like the 12-month roadmap and strategy that you work with people on. What does that then look like once people are in a role? Do you have like a cadence for how often people should be reassessing their current situation to determine like if they should make a change, if they should stay?
So I've read a few good books on the topic of quitting. So Annie Duke, last month my book club, we read a book called Quit by Annie Duke. And in the book, there's this wonderful metaphor about ants. So if you go outside and look on the ground, you might see thousands of ants walking in a straight line to a food source. And it's because one of those ants has found a particular food source that is good for the community and has used, I guess it's pheromones that they use to communicate with the other ants that they should all go back and forth from that food source. And so you see this wonderful straight line of ants, very intelligent, very cooperative. However, if you look closely around that line of ants, you'll actually see a number of individual ants that are kind of not part of the queue. They're not lining up. They're kind of just going off in their own directions. And you're like, oh, did they not get the memo about this wonderful food source that's over here? And they did. But those ants are actually looking for a better food source the whole time. They are conscious. They know that right now this food source that their colony has found is potentially the best, but there's a chance there's a better one. And so these small number of explorer ants are constantly on the lookout, not part of the main drive for a better food source. And if they happen to find one, the whole colony will get notified and they will move to that new food source. And I take this metaphor into the way we think about our careers. No career is perfect. No career is the best job ever. You might love your job, but you know what? You might love another one even more. And I think that always be open to conversations. We should always be networking. A lot of people will treat networking as something they do only if and when they need a job. Sorry, I'm going to overload you with metaphors, but I think of networking as house insurance. So you don't buy house insurance once your house is already on fire, right? It's too late at that point. Your house is going to burn down. Similarly, you don't start networking once you lose your job because it's too late. You can't build a network from zero when you need it in a short amount of time. You need to build a network in advance. You need to be constantly servicing it. You need to be present. They need to know who you are, and you need to be aware of everything that's going, as much as you can, that's going on within your network at all times. Only that way will you know whether or not something better exists, and keep your eyes on ads as well.
This is why I've always been a huge proponent of LinkedIn. Like, if you just sit back and let this potential marketing mechanism for yourself just sit idle, then by the time you actually need it, it's going to be really tough because you're starting from ground zero. Speaking of marketing and Thinking about data leadership, you also work with datapreneurs, right? Like, tell me more about what a datapreneur is.
Quite simply, the data and entrepreneur words smushed together. So I don't want to confuse the matter, but there are kind of two things in my mind when I say datapreneur. On one hand, I'm talking about entrepreneurial thinking for a data leader within a company. Someone who is thinking about using entrepreneurial concepts like marketing, personal branding internally inside a company to sell themselves, to sell their team's ability to write strategies that are, you know, commercially viable and beneficial for the company. That's on one hand. So entrepreneurial thinking for data leaders. But let's put that to one side. Actual individuals with data experience who want to start their own company is what is another term. There's another way of describing a datapreneur. And curiously, I think quite a lot recently, clients of mine have come to me and sort of said, look, I see my role as having a bit of a ceiling. I don't see it going much further or my ability to progress much further. I also look out to the market and I see that it's tough. I'd like to start my own practice, my own business, whatever that happens to be. Sometimes it'll be a consultancy. Sometimes it might be a product. Typically it's a service. And they want my guidance on helping them set themselves up in an entrepreneurial sense.
With these people that you work with, do they typically already have the technical side and they're trying to kind of figure out how to work better with people, or do you have the opposite?
You're right. So they're very good at hands-on working with data. They see perhaps a gap in the market, an opportunity to apply their skills elsewhere. Sometimes while they've had their job, someone has tapped them on the shoulder and said, could you come and do a small piece of work for me as a freelancer? And they've gone, could this be a viable business opportunity that I could get more clients with? So they're trying to understand how they can create a presence, perhaps online, create a brand voice for themselves, things like their unique value proposition, what makes them special within the market, what makes them unique, and makes people want to work with them.
That makes sense that if you're already a leader in a company, you probably already have some degree of credibility. You've got some sense of structure already, so you know how the system runs. At that point, it's just how do I level up myself as a leader to drive more impact? But as a datapreneur in the freelance sense, you now have like 10 different hats that you have to wear. Now
Yeah.
you've got to do the marketing and the project management and like 10 other things. I've been seeing a trend in more people creating their own freelance data businesses or companies. What do you think about people who are kind of new to the field and maybe they're having a hard time breaking into the industry, but they want to pursue freelance work?
So don't do what I did. I quit my job without knowing what I was going to be doing to figure it out. I gave myself, 6 to 9 months to sort of figure it out. Don't do that. I would say try and do it as much as you possibly can while you still have a job, aka a side hustle. Don't get in trouble. Be upfront and transparent with your company about this. Some companies and in some countries in particular might have strong rules about this. So just be very clear and transparent with your manager. Make sure you're not doing anything wrong, but also don't be afraid to give it a go. I think that the best way to work out whether or not you've got a good idea is to sell it, just to find a customer. I think that the mistake that a lot of people make is to try and build a product or service that's perfect before they try and sell it. My advice would be to whip up a one pager of your idea and put it in front of a potential client and say, would you buy this? That is the quickest, fastest way to validate your idea. And that's what you want to do as quickly as possible. I've spoken to someone recently, and this is just an example because I've had this conversation many times, but this guy had plans to create a course. He wanted to train data teams on something in particular. He'd gone and built out tons of materials, got them professionally designed, spent thousands and thousands of pounds on this course that he was creating. I think he'd even hired space for it and was going to go and sell the dates, and asked him what people thought of his product. And he said he hadn't spoken to any customers yet. And he was in the hole already for thousands of pounds. And I'm like, dude, sell.
That's so tough. It requires so much vulnerability to put yourself out there to begin with, and it's like people want the autonomy to work on projects that they want to work on with clients that they love, but you have to put yourself out there. You cannot let perfectionism stop you because otherwise the time will just keep passing.
Yeah, exactly. The struggle, I guess, the desire to build something that's nice, even an MVP that you can sell, totally understand it. Personally, in the past, I've had entrepreneurial projects where I've gone and built something large and then tried to go to market with it. It's just not a good idea, particularly in this day and age with so many tools available to us to quickly iterate and whip up something super basic and get that out in front of people. And it can still look really nice. And we can spend, half a day on it, putting it in front of people who we consider to be our clients, getting their point of view, doing our user research as it would be, understanding whether or not this is actually something that people would open their wallets for. And that's got to be the number one objective. Can you sell this thing? If you're wanting to create a course, don't even create a single material. Just create a one pager or a website, sell the dates, have them have people come along and say, yep, here's £50 or however much you're charging. I'm going to do that. And then once you get at least 6 people or 10 people, whatever your minimum is that have signed up, then go and build the damn thing. If you only get 9 or you only get 6 or whatever the number and it's not enough, refund them.
Yeah.
Or yeah, or whatever your threshold happens to be, make that decision.
Right.
But don't spend any time or money on building something. Try and sell it first.
That is such good practical advice, Tristan. I know there's a lot of people out there who are eager to start up their freelance business, and you probably just gave them the best first step that they could take. Like, get your MVP, put it out there, get the feedback, and then just iterate from there. Before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you about this badass bookshelf. Like, tell me more about that and like the themes that you guys cover, because this
Yeah.
sounds so neat.
It's a book club, basically. It's a virtual one. We meet online. We pick 3 books every month to nominate for selection, and then our members vote on the book that they would like most to read. We always pick nonfiction, business and self-help development books, but it's nothing wooey in the self-help side of things. It's more like businessy career stuff. Things like what have we read? We've read Quit by Anna Duke, which I just mentioned. We read the Netflix book, which is about how Netflix manages its culture. We've read Slow Productivity by Cal Newport, which is about slowing down so that you can become more productive. And things like that. Adam Grant, a couple of his books we've nominated. So those sorts of people are the books we read. It's called the Badass Bookshelf because when you read these books and you apply these learnings, you become a badass. I found that I personally love these books, but was reading them in isolation and I didn't really have anyone to discuss them with. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to rent a crowd and I'm going to get some friends together who can read the same books as me at the same time and we can discuss them. So
This sounds like such an incredible opportunity. Tristan, there's one last question I wanted to ask you for today's chat. What is it about the work that you do that just personally lights you up?
oh man, I love that question. Hairs on the back of my head stand up when my client has a win. When they come to me about something that's holding them back in their career or really they're struggling with, then we chat it through. We think of a few different approaches. They go away and think about it, and we meet in a week or 2 later, and they come and tell me that it's just they've applied it, it's worked, and it's been it's been a great outcome. That just does it for me. I just feel so happy to hear that. I think there's a lot to be said. I mean, I've been through coaching myself. There's a lot to be said for speaking your problems out loud to someone and speaking them out loud to someone who can challenge you on them or can ask you to think about them in a different way. I think that we should all look to do something like that. And you'll be surprised at just how constructive it is.
I agree. It is so empowering when you start seeing the people that you're working with achieving real results and feeling more excited, more motivated. Maybe they're getting more immediate feedback in their day to day after implementing something that you've worked with them on. It's such a good feeling. And I think especially as data people to see that kind of full loop, the closed loop, it's just so powerful. And it's such an amazing feeling. Tristan, your journey is really inspiring to me. I think it's incredible that you went from business analyst all the way up to the top of the chain and now are coming back and kind of being more of a servant leader in this regard of coaching. I think it's amazing what you do.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time today. It's really been great hearing your story.
I love being here. The topics were perfect. It's just the sort of thing I like to talk about all day long. It's an absolute pleasure.